Great. Wonderful. Well, welcome everybody to the Irvine International Academy special school board meeting, August 11th, 2021. And I'll call to order our meeting at 4:00. Somebody want to fill in 4:11? Is that about right?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome everybody, guests included. I'd like to take a quick roll call for board members and establish our quorum. And unless you need to speak, if you can mute your microphone, we'll do the same on this one here. Actually, it's just the speaker, huh? Okay. Very good. Okay, I'll begin. I'm Board Chair Doug Hewson, present today. Is it that one? There we go. Much better. We were just getting a little echo, so thank you. Let's take roll call then. As they're working sound, Miller Zhuang, are you present?
Present.
I see you. Miller, present. Glenn Rogers, present. Wonderful. Ethan Kay,
Present.
present as well. Oh, and Brett Freeman. Absent at the moment is Dr. Jolene Smith, who may join us later, but we do have a quorum established. We'll have a moment now and later for public comments. If you have a public comment, we tend to like to limit those to about 3 minutes. We don't usually respond unless it's something that we think is necessary, but you will have opportunity at the end of the meeting as well. The primary purpose of our meeting today is for some board training on the Brown Act. But could you indicate in the chat area if you have a public comment? Give you a moment. And if not, we're going to move on into our closed session for a period of time. And I'll try to estimate that for all who have come. Comments?
There is a comment.
Okay. Would you like it read or would you like to be heard?
Can I be heard?
Let's go ahead and then have it read. Mary Beth, would you be able to read that on behalf of the commenter? Okay,
Is it possible for me to speak?
being
Can you
typed
guys hear?
right now, so thanks for patience.
He wants to speak it out.
Oh, good. Who is it that's going to address the board?
This is Steve Wang. Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Hey, my name's Steve. I am a parent. I have 2 kids that will be going to IAA. Also a local healthcare provider. Also a member of the PTO COVID Safety Board or Committee. Coordinated the response for my local church, Mariners Church, as well as kind of the reopening plans for my office and a clinical trial that I work with as well. So as a healthcare provider, you know, I have a lot of patients who are also data analysts for hospital chains. I have a lot of patients who are frontline nurses. And all of them are telling me the same thing. They're telling me that this new Delta variant is 1,000 times more infective than the old COVID strains, that it can basically be as contagious as the chicken pox. So, you know, me and as well as many parents, you know, we're very concerned about the current upsurge in COVID cases and how that might affect the school as we go back to in-person classroom. So we just would like to know kind of what is the policy? You know, is there some type of overall policy? Is it comprehensive? Is it enforceable? Can we take a look at it and know exactly what we're doing vis-a-vis the guidance from IUSD and CDPH? You know, the mask mandate, for example, you know, is that something in which will it be enforced while the kids are on campus? Will it be enforced when any adult is present with kids nearby? Because that's part of what they say with CDPH. There are very clear exemptions. I believe they have 3 different exemptions that they have in terms of who can be without a mask. And those people would need to wear, for example, a face shield and a drape. And they need to be physically distanced if they are one of the 3 categories that can be exempted. You know, the whole policy of this whole universal masking thing is to get our kids back in school full-time in person without the social distancing. For those that are excluded, you know, that choose not to wear a mask, they're supposed to be given an alternative form of education, such as independent study. So we just, you know, I would like to just see exactly what it is that IA has comprehensively, you know, not just the mask, but what are we going to do in terms of quarantine? What are we going to be doing in terms of testing? What are we going to be doing for all of these things? Who is our COVID liaison? You know, today there was additional guidance that said that mandatory vaccine for all teachers and school staff. You know, are we going to proceed with that? Are we going to follow the law as far as that goes as well? I think basically a lot of us are just concerned about the safety of our kids. We don't want to be a case like Florida where the pediatric ICUs are overflowing. We don't want to be a case like Georgia where these schools open and 1 week later they're being forced into virtual learning again. So I think I speak in terms of, you know, our committee. We have these concerns. We want to make sure that we have concrete plans in place and that they're enforceable and they'll be followed and they'll be transparent for all of us to see.
Thank you. Thank you, first of all, for your work during the last 18 months in healthcare. Nothing short of heroic, and it's been so nice to come to a season that seemed like it was getting really good. And now with, like you said, Delta variant, we're having to rethink that. We'll get out a written communication to you as parent and others, and then our superintendent will follow up with you personally. We do have access to consultant and a person that was the designated COVID safety specialist for a comparable school last year. But without answering in this setting, let us get you something in writing because that then can detail protocols, expectations, masking, et cetera. I am curious, but I'll have our superintendent follow it up. What law you were referring to, if it was a Cal Ed Code law that talked about mandated vaccines. If you'll communicate that to Dr. Scott at the appropriate time. I'm unaware of that, and I'm within 6 days of always being updated. So thank you. You're a little more current than I am.
Of course, it came out
board
today
members,
actually. So
I know our board members would echo safety, but in this setting, anything else you want to contribute at this moment, or we'll wait for that written communication that I think then puts everybody with the same information universally. Board members, good?
Good.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Safety, safety, safety. There's nothing more precious than children. And those that entrust theirs here in this campus, we share that same concern. Thank you very much. Mary Beth, any other public comments?
Yes, we have Edwin Chu.
Oh, good. Verbal or written? Edwin.
Yes, hi. Thank you for taking my, letting me speak. Actually, so Steve spoke about that well. I can't really add much to what Steve said. The only thing I just wanted to add to that might just be that I've spoken to many other parents from IIA, and I know that there's a lot of us parents that are concerned. I think that part of it is because a lot of us are really excited for IIA being here. A lot of us have sacrificed and made changes for our kids and for ourselves. So we are very much looking forward to this. We thank you guys all for making this possible, for having IIA here too. So we are looking forward to it. We're very excited to have Principal Chuang here too. And but part of my concern is also just making sure that the school does succeed, especially this first year. And then especially obviously with everything that's happening in the world, we just want to make sure that it succeeds appropriately as well. So yeah, I've been kind of following all the health issues, and that's mostly because I have a kindergartner that's going there, and I know that it's her first time, and she's very excited to start school in general. And I know that Principal Chuang has talked a lot about the importance of learning a new language, especially something as complicated possibly for those who haven't spoken Mandarin before, for the Mandarin language. So I just feel like, having this new school here with the language component, if we can try to keep kids here without having some type of outbreak or having to modify things, I definitely want that, but I also, of course, want it to be safe. But I'm very excited for this. Thank you guys all for all your diligent work to make it where it is so far, and I'm excited for next week as well. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Edwin, and Steve as well. Thank you. Wow.
Can I make a quick response?
Oh, yeah, you must. Superintendent, you may have to mute this one.
Just to update.
Make it better to use.
Okay, I'll turn mine off. Just to update, Dr. Vo is a parent of some of our children. He's a cardiovascular surgeon here in Orange County. He's heading up a committee and writing a statement about the mask. Please contact him. If you're a healthcare worker, we'd love to make that committee part of our school. I haven't met any of you personally on the committee. I'd love to meet you and introduce you to Dr. Vo. Thank you.
That's good. Yeah. So Dr. Vo, be a contact for those that want to be part of a parent-based committee. It's great. Other public comments?
Yes, there's one from Lynn.
Lynn.
She says, when can we expect a written procedure? School starts next week.
Written procedures for what?
Regarding COVID safety.
Well, we've already sent out one letter that itemized it based on what the California state guidelines were. So if they haven't received that, Dr. Vo's letter is already written. We're just editing to send out again. And we can include the California state statement.
Do both.
Yeah.
Dr. Vo plan to go out Friday, you think, or?
Yeah, I thought it would be ready today.
So why don't we combine Dr. Vo's and a repeat of our previous communication by Friday? That way everybody has the same information about our COVID safety plans and protocols. Thank you, Lynn.
We have one more. This is from Eileen. She wants to make a comment.
Oh, wonderful. Eileen, thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eileen. I'm a parent of two incoming girls who are going to be in first and third grade. We are super excited to be at the school. I have been homeschooling our children this last year just to keep them safe with COVID. So we are on the extra cautious side, I think, of schooling because of the pandemic. But because of this awesome opportunity, we are taking this risk to send them to school in person because we really want them to be a part of this community. And I also just wanted to echo Steve and Edwin's concerns because I think there are a lot of nervous parents who are already nervous about sending their kids to a new school. But then with this COVID surge in the recent weeks, I think anxiety and fear has really increased as well because we just want to make sure that the school is well equipped and doing everything that they are doing to keep our kids safe. I think there's just a lot of us who are just a little bit scared. And I think if there's anything you guys can do, like just to alleviate those concerns, so just sending out making it really transparent what the protocols are, I think that would really lessen a lot of our fears, or even considering a hybrid approach in the beginning of the school year while this surge is going on until things get a little bit better. I think there are a lot of parents who are also interested in a hybrid approach, and then that way we can keep our kids safe, but then still be a part of the community and join in person when we feel there is less risk. I've spoken to a bunch of parents who also feel the same way. And if there's any way we can provide that as an opportunity to families who really want that, I think that's something we should consider. I just want to throw that out there.
No, thank you. And just so you know, that conversation's happening about virtual learning. So thank you. Lastly, I'll just add this, unless board have comments too. Dr. Scott has consultation from Dr. Vo, but then also a person who last year was the COVID safety officer for a school with 750 children. And the school succeeded from September 4th all the way through the entire year to meet on campus without any outbreaks. And so everything's different, obviously, with the Delta variant, but to have that kind of consultation from real world experience is really helpful. We'll try to put the language together in our Friday communication to build the kind of confidence in our parents that I have based on those processes, procedures, protocols that include everything from hand washing and cleaning to social distancing to sanitation after every playground use, things like that. And so we'll communicate that to everyone the best we can because we share that same priority. Number one priority on campus, that's the best learning. We recognize there could be a desire for virtual, but safety above all. So thank you. Thank you, Irene. Hey, and welcome board member Watson too. Perfect timing. Thank you for coming in person too. Mary Beth, any other public comments?
Yes, we have one from Lynn.
Liz?
Lynn.
Lynn, is yours written or address the board, please?
I'd like to speak. I am a mother of two incoming, a first grader and a fourth grader. And last year, my fourth grader was a hybrid with Irvine Unified, and my daughter was a hybrid as well with Orange Unified. They go to two different schools. But before they went in, that we had a set of procedures. There was videos, there was handbooks to the parents and they gave us a tour of the school so that we felt comfortable letting our children in. And I'm a little bit concerned with IIA. I'm excited, but I am a little bit concerned that it's not quite established yet. And with the COVID variant, like the other parents said, it's very concerning for me as a parent. And I would be more at ease if we had a little bit more information. We did get the email, but that's not what I'm looking for in terms of answering my question. Just the biggest part is also what is the notification procedures to the parents if there is a positive case? Is it just going to be a blast to everybody and then telling us that there's a case on the campus, but our child is not affected? Or will you only notify the parents of the kids that was around the infected child, but you won't notify the whole entire school of parents? So that's kind of like, and then the parents will start talking, did you hear this? And that's why I think it's better if there was something written or so that parents will know, and then they won't talk amongst ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. And we'll make sure we include that. What span any communication would extend to, should there be a known case, and how quarantine will working. Thank you. Very important part of that. Good. Wow. We have the best parents, to be honest, already, just with insightful questions and thoughts. Thank you all. Then if no more, let's move forward on our agenda. We do have a closed session. Parents asked before if we could identify how long we expect this to last. It's a little like asking the question, how long is a piece of string? Depends on how long my board members speak. But in the agenda we have a couple of items. These are generally personnel related. That's why they're closed session. I expect 10 minutes. If I could set the 10-minute frame, I can always come out of closed session, or we'll type something that lets you know it will go longer. So parents, about 10 minutes, guests about 10 minutes. We'll go to closed session then.
I'm going to close this.
That's all right.
Okay. Well, welcome back, everybody. Then reporting out of closed session, we took action on the personnel matters that were agendized. And with the exception of Miller Zhuang, who technologically was not part of that, all the rest of the board members unanimous in approving the hires and processes we described. So great. Moving forward in our agenda then, we're going to have Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll lead that out if I may. Would you place your hand over your heart? I'm looking for our flag internally. I'm going to focus myself in the proper direction if you'll allow me, and then ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. Could I have a motion to approve last board meeting's minutes, please?
I make motion.
Thank you, Glenn. And a second?
Second.
And all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And passes. Then update from Dr. Scott. Do you have update for us today, or are we going straight to our business head?
Business ahead.
Okay, business ahead. We have the formation of a financial committee that will start reporting in September, which is a great step forward organizationally for us. And so now we're into our board agenda. And the first item is board training with Nick Driver. And Nick, would you then introduce yourself, a little of your background, and then take us through the training? I'm going to adjust my chair so I can see the screen you're sharing.
Thanks, everybody. My name is Nick Driver, Clear Thinking. I am a proud supporter of Irvine International Academy and helped at the outset to and witnessed its approval proudly. I spent my first career in China, and so I have a special place in my heart for Mandarin dual immersion schools. I also have been a board member for 10 years at a couple of different boards in the northern part of California, and I've learned a lot and done a lot of these board trainings, including Brown Act and conflict of interest trainings, which we're going to talk about today. I also have led a school, and so I'm hoping to be helpful on all of these fronts. I have to say my Mandarin is a little rusty, so I'm not going to do the board training in Chinese. With that, I know, joking aside, that this is a serious training. I'm going to divide it into two parts. One is the Brown Act training, which is required for all agencies that are public, which obviously includes Irvine International Academy, which is a public charter school. I'm not going to read the mission and vision of Clear Thinking, but I just gave you a brief snapshot of who I am. What I am trying to do is, what I try to do with all of my school partners is to raise up the value of you on the board, as well as the public's right to know everything about what the board of a public agency does. So with that, I will go straight into the Brown Act and what it is, where it came from. I won't read you this whole statement, but as you can see, when the legislature passed this and the governor signed it way back in the early 1960s, well before there were any charter schools, it was coming out of a place where there was not a whole lot of transparency. And the people put pressure on the legislature, which passed this groundbreaking law. It was one of the first in the country. Most states have open meeting act laws now, and the Brown Act is what ours is called in California, and it is one of the first, if not the first. Obviously, the public has the right to retain the control of the money or the taxpayer funds that they give to all public agencies, which includes IIA. The legislative intent was, and little known fact, Ralph Brown is the guy that this is named after, not Jerry Brown, not Willie Brown, Ralph Brown, whom not many of us knew because he died a while ago and he was the leader in the assembly from 59 to 61. But that all acts should be taken openly because these are public funds and all deliberations taken openly. Please feel free to stop me anytime with any questions, but I'm going to race through the kind of history parts so we get to the nitty gritty stuff, which is the rules of how you govern. A legislative body includes the body of any local agency. That means, and we'll get into this in a bit, not only the board of directors here, but any committees that the board chooses to form. Dr. Scott just mentioned, or maybe Doug, you just mentioned a new committee that was just formed, which is the Finance Committee. That one will also be subject to the Brown Act. So any commission, committee, board, or any other body created by a formal action of a legislative body. Charter schools were created in 1992 by the legislature. And from that time on, there was a big discussion about whether they should be applied, the Brown Act should be applied to them. And about 5 years ago, it was deemed by the legislature again that absolutely charter schools, some of whom weren't following the Brown Act, now had to. And obviously this board and this school receives funds from, in this case, the state of California through the Orange County Department of Education. I won't read this whole thing about what a local agencies are, but charter schools are considered to be local agencies, and the California Department of Education considers charter schools as school districts. So even though IAA is just one school, it is also technically a school district running one school. That could change. You might have other IIAs in the future, but right now you're just running one school. So let me get into what a meeting is. Obviously, we are in a meeting now. The reason why we know this is not just because it was noticed in advance, which is required by law, but also because we have given the public equal access to what all the board members have. In fact, we have a board member joining by Zoom, and all parents who want to be here as well have been given access to join via Zoom as well. So any congregation of a majority of the members of the body, which in this case, I believe is 7 of you. So anytime there is a quorum, meaning anytime there is 4 of you, and that could change depending on how many board members you have, but not how many board members show up, just how many board members you have. You have to have a quorum, meaning 4 currently, unless you choose to have more board members in the future. I won't read the whole text of this, but you get the picture. Any item, taking action on any item within the subject matter jurisdiction. A serial meeting is something that is very easy to do by mistake. And the only times that I've ever made this mistake and then had to double back and correct it is when I inadvertently talked to one board member and then talked to another board member right afterwards and conveyed the intent of one board member to the other. So as I said, I didn't do it on purpose, and I was swiftly criticized by my board chair for doing it at the time. This is when I was newly on the board 10 years ago. And I was just having a conversation. But the fact is that and now with email and Slack and texts, it's even easier to have serial meetings than it was back in the day of just telephones or in-person conversations. It is super easy to convey the intent of one board member to the other, thereby creating a serial meeting. So just when you're thinking about what is going on with the business of the board, just remember that you are entitled to share your opinion with any other board member. You're entitled to share the opinion with staff as well. And you're entitled, as I'll get into in a bit, to have the staff brief you on anything that you anything that's a subject matter of the school. But don't conduct a series of communications of any kind, either through your staff or directly via text, via Slack, via phone, via anything, email. Otherwise, it is a serial meeting, and it is easy these days to track that because people usually communicate not only by phone, but they communicate with many other kinds of devices such as email and text that can be grabbed. Staff meetings, as I just mentioned, are permitted. There is no problem at all for not only Dr. Scott, but any member of the staff to brief you board members, and that can include what I'm doing here to do. I'm an outside contractor, if you will, friend, partner that is engaging in a conversation, but it's a one-way conversation to you. You're welcome to ask me questions because we're in a board meeting. But outside of a board meeting, I could still be doing this exact thing and do it all the time. But at that time, if I was doing it or Dr. Scott was doing it, it wouldn't be permissible to communicate back any intent from any of you board members to other board members. Any questions on that? It's pretty straightforward, but basically one-way communications are fine and two-way communications are a little trickier. So let's get into some of the mechanics or logistics of how meetings are called. There are three types of meetings. Hopefully you will never, ever have to call an emergency meeting. Emergency meeting is just 1 hour notice. And as I'll get into, it's for an emergency. A regular meeting is 72 hours notice. A special meeting, which is just fine. I believe this meeting is called as a special meeting. All that means is it's a 24-hour notice instead of a 72-hour notice. And so it does give you a little more freedom to call a meeting with plenty of notice, but without necessarily having the full 3 days. There are a few things you can't do in a special meeting, such as approve the executive director's contract. You have to do that at a regular meeting. Most everything else you can do at a special meeting. And as I said, hopefully you will never have to do an emergency meeting because that is some kind of a work stoppage. An earthquake, for instance, you will hopefully never have, so I won't belabor that piece. As I said earlier, committees are also bound by the Brown Act. So you've already set up a facilities standing committee. As I said, committees, as it says here, generally the Brown Act applies to committees. There are exceptions, which I'll talk about on the next slide. The board has just created a finance committee, so it's created it by an ordinance, resolution, or formal action. That also may be in your bylaws to have standing committees such as a finance committee. A typical other standing committee is an academic or educational committee or program committee, it's sometimes called. Sometimes a school will have a facilities committee, although I don't think you need one because you have a facility that doesn't need to be discussed that much. Any questions about committees? The only other exception to committees is advisory committees. So it is perfectly fine for you to have ad hoc or other kinds of advisory committees. Typically, an ad hoc committee only meets for a certain period of time. Fiscal or finance is usually an ongoing committee, which is not ad hoc. Advisory committees that are composed of fewer members than a quorum of the board, so in this case, fewer than 4, do not need to be noticed by the Brown Act, do not have to have an agenda created, do not have to have any minutes circulated to the public afterwards. And so feel free to have advisory committees. Sometimes they can be board advisory committees. They could also be executive director advisory committees if that's your choice. That's since it's not something that's subject to the Brown Act, that's at your leisure to decide which one you want to have. More logistics on how you call and then have meetings. Teleconferencing, as we're witnessing today with one of your board members, maybe 2, phoning in is perfectly fine. That the Brown Act was changed about 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, to allow teleconferencing. I will get into Zoom calls in a minute because Zoom is an even newer exception that was, of course, introduced because of the pandemic and was never allowed before. But teleconferencing is totally fine. It's even possible to have all of you, if need be, phone conferencing in. All votes have to be taken by roll call in this case. So it's a little trickier that way, not tricky, but just a little more because we want to have people hear how a vote is going. And if a person is only phoning in as opposed to Zooming, you can't see what somebody raising their hand or saying aye.
If we're doing Zoom, then since we're on video, lifting our hand, we're okay without calling out a name, or is it a gray area right now?
Technically, you should be doing roll call in the Zoom era because it's treated as a teleconference. But this is a board training, so you may want to start that today, or you may want to start that with your next board meeting.
Okay.
But you probably should get in the habit anyway, because as I will discuss in a minute, Zoom calls may be going away as a mode, depending on how the pandemic goes. This is a pandemic emergency order from the governor that we are all allowed to do Zoom calls now, but they're supposed to be coming to an end. The tricky part about about teleconference locations or teleconferencing is you're supposed to list every location, not just the school location, but every member's house, office, or hotel room where they're phoning in from. And that's to give the public a right to go to that location to be part of that person's meeting, which sounds kind of ridiculous, but they want to make sure the public has access. You would think that the public would have enough access by going to the school site to join in a meeting then or there. But this is the law, that in the future, when you have somebody phoning in, and it doesn't matter where they're phoning in from. They could be phoning in from Canada or from Arizona or from New York, any place, the location of where they're phoning in from must be included on the agenda and has to be located, has to be accessible to the public.
So do you give your home address for calling in?
Yeah, which is why you want to think twice about taking a call or going into a meeting from your home. If you have a contentious item on the agenda, you may not want to open your home open to any member of the public who might choose to come to your location instead of the school. So that's one caution. And we hope that the Zoom era will continue. But I will say, as it says in the bottom in italics, the teleconference location provisions have been suspended during the current virtual era. So there is no need, there is nothing wrong with your agenda as posted today. There's no locations needed because we're still in the pandemic. However, the governor has just announced that he is rescinding his zooming in regulations effective October 1st. So if he doesn't change that, and he might change it again because we are seeing a variant, as we all know, but if he doesn't change that, then we have to go back to the old rules starting in October, which means all of your addresses where you are phoning in from will have to be noticed on the agenda. So that's, I hope it doesn't happen. I hope he makes another accommodation. We hope he doesn't make an accommodation because there's a further pandemic, but we hope he makes an accommodation, but we'll be seeing in the next 30 days whether he makes an additional accommodation. And if he does not, then the board meeting notice must, in addition to being placed on the front door of the school, must also be placed on the website of the school and also at each location where
On the front door of my home.
at the front door of your home. If you were phoning in from home or your office, if you're phoning in from your office, which is inconvenient for each of you. And it's not, of course, the Brown Act was not meant to be convenient to us individuals who serve on boards. It was meant to be convenient to the public.
Is there a specific site that we can go to or subscribe to hear about changes, like you mentioned, October 1st, or these updates that come up?
I will certainly be giving Dr. Scott regular updates on this. There's also, the governor has a website. This is definitely going to be on the front page of the governor's website because it affects every single public agencies, which is many. It's like 10,000 public agencies, including, all of the school districts, all of the charter school boards, all of the water boards, so many public agencies this affects. So we're not going solo on this, luckily, and the governor will have that on his website, and that'll be your fastest way of getting the information. What is not a meeting on the Brown Act? I mentioned this earlier. Individual contacts between members is not obviously a meeting. In fact, feel free to voice your opinions about a certain upcoming piece of policy matter that's going to be on the board. Just don't ever communicate what that person says to another board member. It's fine to have very opinionated discussions. Confine it to just two of you, and or any two of you, and you can have a serial meeting. A serial conversation. Just don't describe what the other board members are saying when you're having those conversations. Also, if you are going to, for instance, OCDE's ceremonial function or even their board meeting to advocate for IIA, that's totally fine. That's their business, which also might happen to be your business too. That's totally fine not to describe that as a board meeting because you are at another board's meeting, in this case, your authorizer. And any kind of ceremonial occasion is also fine as long as you're not talking about board business. So if you have a celebration, a fundraiser, whatever it is, those are not board meetings. Just don't describe board or talk about board business. Open and public meetings. So members of the public, as you have done so well, Doug, thank you for opening this board meeting up to the public. The public has a right to speak not only at the beginning of the board meeting on non-agendized matters, but also on agendized matters. So you should have a public comment period on every action item. It's gray area as to whether you also include that on non-action items. I would say there's no best practice on that. It's probably, it's not as consequential, certainly, as when you're taking a vote on an action item. But as it says, the agenda shall provide an opportunity for members of the public to address the legislative body on any item within the subject matter jurisdiction of the body, and that takes its form in two ways. One is items that are not on the agenda, such as you had at the beginning of the meeting, and the other is when you take an action item, you can do this one of two ways. You can have the public comment before you have board discussion, or after you have board discussion, but before there's a board vote. Either way is fine, as long as you do it before the board actually votes. Any questions about that?
Does it suffice to have a comment period up early in the agenda?
Mhm.
All of the action items are pre-published and have them receive their opportunity to comment way up at the front, as opposed to after, in between 7 or 8 different actual votes?
Yeah, I would say that's a great question, Doug. I would say it's a both and. So there's boards do this different ways, and you've probably been to other boards and they have closed session at the end. And then they come out for one just report out. I think it's a best practice to have public comment allowed at the beginning. But as I said, that's really supposed to be only for non-agendized items, such as the ones that were brought up today around COVID. Totally appropriate, not on your agenda, but really relevant to not just you guys and your board business tonight, but the operations of the school. But then you as board chair should also be opening up your items, and those are specifically the approval items. So not this necessarily, because it's not an approval item, but your approval items should probably be, you should be asking for board public comment. You probably won't get much, but you may.
Okay.
I can tell you a little bit more at a later time about consent calendars, which is an efficient way to do a number of board approvals all at once. But this is the way this has been set out, and it's perfectly legal, it's perfectly fine, but that's what you might want to do tonight.
Great.
Okay. Recording of meetings, anybody can record this meeting. We have to record the meeting. The Zoom era requires a Zoom recording and then posting of the recording. And that's a dynamic thing that will not stay after the Zoom era. But anybody else can come to a meeting and record the meeting, either with a video camera or with just an audio device. Also, public records. We're a public agency, so we're subject to the same Public Records Act disclosures that all public agencies are disclosed to. We have to, if somebody asks for public records, we have to provide them.
Glenn, when your deadline hits, you've been gracious already. We just know you have to exit. We don't think you're going to be rude at all. So just don't hesitate.
Yeah, and I'll be done with the Brown Act portion of this probably before 5:30. I may not be done with the conflict of interest training, but I will also can also send it to you. As I mentioned before, agenda requirements. I won't go over these too much, but this agenda is perfectly fine. A brief general description of each item of business to be transacted or discussed. No item except as otherwise provided by law. There's one small proviso. No action or discussion should be undertaken on any item not appearing on the posted agenda, and any member of the public may request and must receive a copy of the agenda and other meeting materials. So there is one exception, which I don't advise a best practice. It's right at the bottom of this slide. Off agenda items may be considered immediately with a 2/3 vote. That sometimes comes up. It's highly preferable to put that on the next board meeting agenda for obvious reasons, because it's not in advance. But I'm not sure how to make those notices go away, sorry. But members of the legislative body or its staff may briefly respond the way you did. Both Dr. Scott and Doug, you both responded to public statements that were made by the public, and that is totally fine. A board member or board chair typically may request staff to respond to public or to agendize for a future meeting. So those are some best practices around when an item is not appearing on the agenda, which of course happened tonight, totally fine. Closed session. There are 5 items, 5 buckets of items only that you can go to closed session for. As you noted, Doug, that one of them was tonight. That was a personnel or employee matter or matters. And the requirement is that you report out that there was an action taken on one of these 5 items. These are the only 5 items that you can go into, that you can conduct in closed session, and they're for privacy reasons, or they're for privacy of the school reasons, or privacy of personnel reasons. Litigation, employees, real property negotiations. That, of course, is to if you're in a negotiation with a landlord or a future landlord, you don't want to disclose to the public an amount of money that you might be paying that then somebody can undercut or overbid on. Security of public buildings and public services, and labor negotiations. Any questions on those? 2 main rules to remember. The most important is the second one. You cannot, as board members, ever disclose what you discussed in a closed session. It is a private item that is you're only privy to because you are a member of the board, or because the board chair has invited you into that closed session. So it is, of course, perfectly fine for the board chair to invite staff members or other contractors like lawyers into closed session, but it is at the behest, if you will, of the board chair. Certain specified actions taken by the legislative body in closed session must be noticed and then publicly reported. That's the way that your board chair did it tonight. And then the public report of the action has to be taken, including the vote count. Minutes are typically approved at the next board meeting. They must include all material motions and votes. That is very simply what a minute is just a board vote of the action that's taken. Doesn't need to include a long, what I would call notes page. You might want to keep notes also, but that is different from minutes. Formal minutes are typically just the actions, not the discussion items, and they should be both in best practice voted on at the next board meeting and then published on the website. And as I said earlier, the key contract clause, the only key contract that you cannot do in a special meeting like this one, which is only 24 hours notice, is your sole managed employee. In this case, your executive director, Dr. Scott. It must be at a regular meeting with 72 hours notice. Best practice as well as the law. Enforcement and penalties. Criminal penalties are such that if you do attend a meeting where action is taken in violation of the Brown Act, you can be held or found guilty of a misdemeanor. It does allow for intent, even though some of these things here don't allow intent. So I'll describe that in a minute. There are many ways to avoid a criminal penalty, and it's very, very seldom to have a board member be found guilty of a misdemeanor because there are all these mistakes that in the minute I'll describe do-overs for. And I won't read all of these, but here are some common Brown Act mistakes. The last one, failing to reconvene an open session after closed session. If you have a closed session at the end of your board meeting, that is something that's very common mistake that's done. Everybody wants to go home, they're tired, there's nobody left anymore because there's no public anymore because the last item is a closed session, you forget to go back out and report out of closed session. Any questions on any of these common Brown Act mistakes? So here is the most common way that Brown Act mistakes or violations are cured. Anyone can attempt to stop or reverse board action. It can be a member of the public, it can be the DA, any interested party can file a lawsuit, but there's a cure and correct. So it's very easy for the board to take a new action within the next 30 days. Once they've been noticed that they may have done something in error. So this happens sometimes with, it's never happened to me, a member of the public or the DA, but our authorizer has said, we don't think that you did this with enough notice, or we think that, this wasn't accurately described, and please do it again. Okay, no harm, no foul. We'll go back in, put it on the next month's agenda, or in some cases have a special meeting to cure the problem. And sometimes it is a perception problem, sometimes it's an actual problem. We all make mistakes when we're rushing to put together agendas, and so there's a very easy cure or correct at any time, especially if a court deems it's necessary. You should probably do it. And this last provision, almost never happens, but a prevailing plaintiff can obtain recovery of attorney fees and court costs. So hopefully you'll never be in that situation. You have an authorizer that I know is good at holding its authorized charter schools to the Brown Act, among other things. So I'm sure they'll be reaching out to you if they feel like we're doing anything wrong, but hopefully we won't be doing anything wrong. That concludes the first part of the training. I know I've raced through some of this because, I wanted, many of you already know a lot about the Brown Act, and I didn't want to go too slowly, but I'm happy to pause here if you have any questions before I go into the part 2, which is conflict of interest training, which is also a requirement. Any questions on the Brown Act?
I have a question.
Please.
In this virtual Zoom in-person era, is it required for everyone's face to be visible who's on the board? Like today, I didn't bring my computer because normally I have it at all times, but I was busy, so therefore no one really can see me. So there could be a lot of people in this room that are on the board that are not visible. Is it required that I need to be visible?
No, there's no requirement. That's a great question, though. The reason why, one of the reasons why a roll call vote is required in the Zoom era, which is also true if you have even one person teleconferencing in, is because the public can't see all of your faces. And so they want to know that you have voted a certain way, and they won't know that unless there is a roll call vote, because either your board chair or your secretary will ask for a roll call, and they'll go down over the number of each of the member names and the member, and then you will respond. So that's the way that the public will know how you specifically voted, not how you voted as a board. And you will find as a board, I know you're a new board, but you'll find as a board that many of your votes are unanimous, but still the public has a right to know. And also, of course, there is such a thing as an abstention. You can also abstain if you feel like you don't know enough or whatever, but you will invariably, at least once a year, have a vote that is not consensus, not unanimous. And, the public has a right to know that you have voted a certain way. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so the roll call is in lieu of
That's right.
visual.
In lieu of an actual view. It would be logistically challenging for any public agency to have every member viewable by the public unless every member brought a laptop. You can't require a board member to bring a laptop or have a screen in front of them to show their face. So, yeah.
Point of order, do we need a 5-minute break? And is this the point for you to complete? Is that good? Let me just.
Yeah.
Let know, and then we could either pause recording and resume or just continue. Public, we're going to take a 5-minute break at this point in time, and we'll rejoin everyone again in 5. We may go ahead and stop recording and restart, but we'll be back in 5. Miller, is that okay with you online? Very good. Thank you. Okay, restrooms. Welcome back from the break, everybody. We'll continue with our training and board agenda item A, training by Nick Driver.
Thank you, board members. Thank you, public. Let me continue with part 2 of this training. And apologies for the little things that are showing up on front of your screen telling me my microphone's off. It's on purpose. The conflict of interest training is an equally important part of the training for any public agency, including this board. The definition of a conflict is obvious, so I won't read the whole thing, but it includes the underlying words: participates, influences, or attempts to influence others making the contract or the decision. So there are a couple of different rules or acts, I should say, that I'm going to cover, and that have overlapping overlapping power over what a conflict is. And so that's even more confusing, but I'll talk about that now. So you, as a 501c3 nonprofit, are subject to the Corporations Code, Section 5233, anti-self-dealing transactions, but the much more relevant or salient two acts are the Political Reform Act, which is what all charter schools have been subject to since they've started in 1992, and Government Code Section 1090, which all districts have been subject to for a long, long time. I can't remember when 1090 was passed, but a long time ago. And more recently, in the last 5 years, it was clarified that charter schools are also subject to. So I'm going into those two in much more detail. The PRA, the Political Reform Act, was established in 1974, and there was a commission set up at the time, which still exists, called the Fair Political Practices Commission, enforces compliance with the Political Reform Act. So I'll go through that act first and then through Government Code 1090. Compliance in this is, I will say up front at the beginning, a little easier than the Government Code 1090. It means identifying and avoiding participating in, making, or attempting to influence decisions where there's a personal, material, financial conflict of interest. So you should have adopted a PRA compliant conflict of interest code. If you haven't, should. And then once a year, April 1st, you as board members, you, Dr. Scott, also have to file an annual statement of economic interest. Actually, April 1st is the annual date, but since you are all coming onto a new board, that's the other time that you have to file a Form 700. I can send Dr. Scott a copy or a link to that government code, to the statement of economic interest, but you should all fill one out, and the copy of which would, unless OCD or authorizer says otherwise, should reside in a file cabinet in the office here. More later, I can take questions on that. It's not that complicated. It's actually, for most people, just a single page document. So identifying a conflict of interest, does the decision involve a public official, which is you guys, or a key employee, which is Dr. Scott, participating in making, or attempting to influence a government or a school decision? Do you have a qualifying financial interest, and is the financial interest directly or indirectly involved in the decision? If the official answers yes to all questions, then you have to disclose the conflict on the record, leave the room during the discussion and vote, and comply with anti-self-dealing provisions and bylaws, abstain from voting. We'll go into the GC 1090 in a minute, and recommend consulting with an attorney before any action. So Government Code 1090, more strict. As I said earlier, it became clarified just a couple of years ago that it did also apply to charter schools. Public official plus a public contract plus a financial interest equals an absolute prohibition on the entire board entering into the contract, even if it's with the best vendor, the best price includes employees of the organization. So that's why we need to be careful about public contracts and all of you as public officials or your key employees. So how does that, how do those two fit together? One is, as I said, more lenient than the other. Disclosure and recusal avoids a violation. So an individual, any of you individuals who's making a decision can just recuse yourself and leave the room. And as long as the board of directors still has a quorum, you can take action. GC 1090, disclosure and recusal does not avoid a violation, and it effectively prohibits paid employees from serving on the board. However, there's a carve out for charter schools. So when they created an update, and I'll go into this in a minute, they created a carve out for charter school employees to serve on the board. So it's actually possible, which is very confusing because no other public agency can do this, but charter schools can. The PRA, or the Public Political Reform Act, requires an adoption of a conflict of interest code, which I believe you've already done that, and must be approved by the appropriate code reviewing body to be effective, which is you. Also, it's going to be something that your OCDE, your authorizer, requests or requires, either at the outset, they've already done it, or when they come and do their annual visit once a year. I mentioned earlier that you are now all required to file a Form 700, designated employees. That may also include your principal. It certainly includes your executive director, and it definitely includes all board members. The basics are, as I said earlier, they should be submitted to the school, kept in basically the same under lock and key, just like the other personnel files. They have to be signed, and it becomes a public document when it's filed, and has to be available to the public upon request. I've never had a member of the public ever request my Form 700. It's usually something that stays gathering dust in a file, but that is the rule. Now, penalties and remedies for when you knowingly or unknowingly violate this. Administrative sanctions for the Public Political Reform Act, like a do-over or a cease and desist order, and civil penalties, and sometimes they can include damages or attorney's fees. Usually it's something where an authorizer that doesn't like you uses it against you to say you're doing something wrong, and may give you a notice of violation, or even worse, they could use it to start revocation proceedings. GC 1090 is harsher. It could permanently disqualify you from holding any office in California. Additionally, any contract made in violation of GC 1090 is void, and there are criminal penalties. Now, I don't know anybody on any charter board that's ever been convicted of a crime or penalty, crime under Government Code 1090, but that is something that all public agency key employees and board members are subject to. So it's something that everybody else is doing, and that's why we have to do it too, because we're trying to be public agencies, public schools, even though we are also governed by private corporation laws, because we are nonprofit public benefit corporations, 501c3s. So we're this interesting hybrid between a public agency as well as a private corporation. So that's a much shorter and kind of nastier presentation. It's not something that you ever want to be in a position of doing. So just know that that's something that I can help guide you, as well as guide Dr. Scott on an ongoing basis if you like, because it is something just like creating an agenda, just like having board meetings, that once you get into the practice of doing it in a public setting, it becomes easier. But at the beginning, it's not always not always easy to do, and so you have lawyers as well who can advise you on things like conflict of interest, but feel free to ask me any questions now or later, and for serious allegations, obviously you should also consult your lawyers. I'm not a lawyer. Any questions?
That's one. Can we get the copy of the slides?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
Probably the easiest way is if I send it to Dr. Scott and he distributes it. I could also do it another way, but if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd be happy to send that out.
Thank you, Nick.
Yeah.
I really do.
Thank you.
Very succinct about the brown side.
Yeah. Okay. No problem. Yeah. I wish, it could all be roses and, cream and it's not, it doesn't make your job any easier. But that's why you get paid the big bucks, right?
Volunteer positions.
All right. That's all I have. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and grateful having you in this meeting as well, and you may get to contribute a little more as we go on. Moving through the board agenda, thank you, Nick Driver. B on our agenda is an update on the employee handbook. It's knowledge for the board. Our petition requires that all teachers are properly credentialed according to the current law. Dr. Scott, is that something that needs any discussion or
We have
clarification?
We have been working on it with our staff, and we've made some adjustments. But you haven't received a copy of it, or have you?
They have.
Yeah.
It wasn't
Yeah.
done.
Mhm.
Okay, so we're just making everything legal. So I would urge us to vote to approve it.
Oh, okay.
So the changes.
Motion then to approve the update to the employee handbook.
Motion to approve.
Okay, Brett motion and
I second.
Ethan
seconds.
and we have a second then. Let's do this then, give an opportunity for any public comment on the update to the employee handbook. And it looks good. We'll move forward then with a vote. Let's do it this way. We'll do it by name. And so Board Member Houston, myself, I vote yay, yes. Board Member Watson? Yes.
Yay.
Watson, yes. Aye is a better
Yeah,
way.
it's not like
Like I'm in the Navy. Yeah, thank you.
There's no rule on which word you have. As good as a yes, as good as a yes.
Board Member Freeman?
Yes.
And in my sequence, next goes online to Board Member Zhuang.
同意 in
Okay,
Chinese.
thank
Yay.
you. And lastly, Aaron, as board member.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So unanimous, thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is the approval of a contract for Dr. Vo. This one was part of our overall employee discussion in closed session. Do we need to do this one in public session?
Well,
then?
it's, I don't think so, because he was an employee.
Yeah, I think it's redundant. It's an employee matter. Next is one for discussion. We're going to ask for vote on approval of an IT contract. It actually looks like two contracts. One with Storyland, which I believe is related to website storage and development. The second, and the second is Thinkware, which is IT services with Glenn Severino. This one will take a little bit of discussion. One, I'll ask this question on the Storyland. This is the company that helped us take the code that was overseas and supported, moved it to local servers here, put the security on it. It's doing some time and materials updates. Is that right?
Correct.
Do you want to move into a more formal agreement with them for a longer term support, or just get approval for the time and materials they've been doing?
Just the time and materials now.
Okay, under $5,000?
Yes.
Okay, well, yeah. Doesn't formally require a vote, but could I have a motion then to pay the bill that we have for Storyland under $5,000?
Ethan's.
Okay, we have from Aaron, and second, please.
Aye, second.
Okay, thank you. Then let's do this vote. I'll vote yes on that. Watson,
Aye.
yes.
Watson.
Freeman,
Fred, aye.
yes.
Ethan.
Ethan.
Aye.
Well, I said Aaron earlier.
No, said
Okay.
aye
said
also.
All unanimous. Then. Second one, separate, is a little bit different. And this is one where it'd be good to, now that we have our conflict of interest training. Thinkware is a company that provides IT support for schools, particularly one of our board members, Dr. Jolene Smith, has used them for many, many years at her school. She introduced them to Dr. Scott. They've been doing some time and materials help, consulting and getting computers configured within our school. Here's the interesting disclosure and a little commentary. I also know of this company because I, about 3 years ago, received a royalty from their owner because 20 years ago, I sold the company to him for $1. So it's a strange, weird coinkydink that comes full circle because it's a small world. That's a conflict of interest. Now, I can disclose that. By the way, the amount I received in a royalty is $500 a month. over the last 20 years has been zero, but 3 years ago it started as 500. But it's a conflict for me. It also is a potential violation of the 9900 if we do something formal with them. And so that's where I look for a little advice. Maybe we should not do more than just the time and materials that happened so far and not enter into a formal contract with bidding and everything that goes to any, significant degree. What's your feeling on the 9,900? The other one's a little easier because it's disclosure is the requirement, but are we permitted as a board to even do business with them with a board member that receives a royalty from that company?
Well, certainly disclosure and recusal is the right way to go for you, board chair. In terms of this is not a company, it sounds like, that you own, but you did.
No ownership interest.
And you do receive financial
Remuneration.
some sort of remuneration. So I haven't come across this before. So it's a little tricky because it's not your contract, sorry, not your company, but you still do receive some remuneration from them. So if there is, I would say, complying with the Political Reform Act and leaving the room is it easily clears the first bar. Government Code 1090 is much more, as you said, much more strict. But I would say that because you're not the owner of the company anymore, and you've sold it 20 years ago, that you're probably fine. But I think the board would feel better if you, because you have disclosed it, and therefore you are probably going to recuse yourself, that you should step out of the room for a minute.
I'll do that and allow, discussion to continue on that. And even if the board decides not to act on that ability to enter into some future contract, great.
Yeah.
But I'll step out.
And do you have a vice chair?
She's not
Chair, vice chair,
Treasurer.
treasurer, vice chair. Yeah, so I'll allow board member Watson to continue the discussion. And Mayor Duff can call me back at that time. Thank you, by the way.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, that was, yeah.
It's timely, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so for this motion, or for this, I will take over for Doug briefly as the chair, board member Watson. So this is, we want to approve this thinkware contract. Is this going to be more than 5,000, guessing? So it's on our,
It may be.
we say maybe, what are we looking at?
1,500 a month, I think, for IT right now.
And this would be like a contract, like
Yes.
but we haven't seen any contracts, right? Or I don't remember seeing a contract for this.
We've
If
been
we're talking
having
about
trouble
future.
Getting the contract figured, completed, getting the right wording. I've been working on it, but
So as if Glenn were here, I think he would say, if there's no contract that we can look at, then we're gonna have to push this to the next board meeting, which is gonna be in 2 weeks, I'm thinking, at the
yeah,
end of the
I
month.
would suggest that.
I do have, if I may, this is Ethan speaking. Is there any immediate need to prove it today, and or can it be postponed till our next meeting? I realize IT is a very critical part in the operation.
And he's in the middle of work right now too,
Okay.
doing work for us. I just can't give you the right contract, but I have copies. It just doesn't say the right word on it. So I don't.
Okay.
I mean, this brings up, you brought it up, Chair Watson, and that is, the documents should be made available to the public as well as to board members for everything that you're passing on the agenda. And so at least for next time, certainly this contract, because there's a question mark about it, but all the other contracts too in the future should have those documents alongside the actual agenda. That's just it's not only best practice, it's also a requirement. That'll allow the board members as well as the public to see what's in the contract and see if there's anything that they should be asking questions about. That's the point of having a publicly noticed meeting. So that's certainly something that I would advise for this meeting, as you just suggested, if it's possible. The other ones, the only other thing I would say about this contract is you could, if it was necessary to ask your board to vote on this tonight, because otherwise service would be stopped, you could approve it yourself for a temporary short-term contract because it's under $5,000. Because $1,500 a month could only be, you could do it for a month, right? That's your purview. Anytime it's a longer term contract over 4 months, right? Then, of course, it's over $5,000. You would need your board approval. But you could, you have the authority to enter into a short-term contract with this contractor without having either the board chair, Doug, or the board as at all kind of weigh in, because you have that authority.
I might also ask if you've received other competitive bids for the same type of work, the scope of work, so that we know that it's the best fit, let's say, for IA, not just price, but the service level and all the things that they're going to offer versus thinkware. So we can make it, someone can make a case as to why they've been recommended, but why they would be the right fit for IA.
Yeah, there's, in the contract, there's a lot of things that he's doing. It's well priced. That's not the question. It's just we need to get the wording correct. So I'll be sure to get all that in your hands so you can see it. So I would suggest putting this off to the next meeting for sure, and that with the contract. If there's an emergency, I'll pass for a month.
Has anyone else bidded on the work?
No. I don't think they'll match it. Truthfully.
Seems to me that we might have the same situation with E, because I don't remember seeing a Vended Mills contract.
Which one?
The E, of which I know we can get Doug back for that. But for the Vended Mills contract, that's the next on the agenda. So first, before I jump to that, let me, anyone want to raise a motion to table the D, approval for the IT contract with Thinkware and Glenn Severino, and table it to the next board meeting?
Like to raise a motion?
Do I have to raise a motion for that? Second?
Ethan seconds.
And then you should ask for public comment. I guess there's no public left, but you should say.
Any public comments on that? If not, I should say, I think Board Watson, Chair, temporary Chair Watson says aye as well. So the passes unanimous that we will table that into the next meeting. Now we will invite Board Fusen back.
And I will, as Doug comes back into the room, I will research this specific potential conflict so that I can advise both Doug and also all of you on, because I just haven't seen it come up before. It's an interesting one.
Yeah.
But you want to let him know what we just did.
Oh, so we just agreed, or we just passed a motion on the D IT contract. Do I have to give him more?
Just that you tabled it.
No, we tabled it.
Oh, very good. Wisdom at work.
I'd like to see it. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Moving to item E then, vended meals contract. This has been in works for some period of time. You want to give a summary, Dr. Scott, of our lunch program?
I wanted to ask Mary Beth if the contract was not included, so I'm surprised it's not included.
I did not see it in the Mills
Okay.
contract.
Well, to summarize, this vendor deals with charter schools. Specifically, several charter schools recommended them from Orange County Department of Ed that are under their auspices. The meals are $4.50 each. Parents order them. They can get them either hot meals or cold meals. We're going to go with hot, bring them in, distribute them. And the cold meals we're probably going to pick up on. So it's a great price and they deliver at 6:30 in the morning. We've passed the health inspection in preparation for them. The county health has come. Our kitchens have been passed. We're all set to receive it.
So they bring it in, then we leave it in the kitchen until lunchtime and distribute it. So this is something that in the contract, but we obviously need food.
Yeah.
For the kids
Mary Beth,
next week.
is there the contract attached for the meals mended? It was sent to them? Okay.
Sorry.
What is the name of the?
Nutrition Plus.
Oh, yeah, we've been talking about this for some period
Actually,
of time.
now, okay,
So
sorry.
we finally agreed on $4.50 for Nutrition Plus.
Right.
That's great.
Thank you, Mary Beth.
Any discussion, public comment on the Nutrition Plus contract for lunches at $4.50.
Just a public question, and that is this something you're doing through the National School Lunch Program, or people are gonna pay for it?
Parents are gonna have to pay for it now. We're not eligible because of Irvine's high income.
Yep, okay.
However, we are intending to hire a consultant for $2,000 to apply for the following year because California is paying for all meals.
Oh, that's changing.
That's
Yeah,
what I was going to suggest, but in that case, we would have to do this really rigorous bidding process that a separate company would have to put an RFP out on your behalf. And then you would have all the companies apply to that consultant, and they would choose the right one. So that's a much longer process. You do get everything paid for, but it's a little bit of a onerous process. So this is completely fine because you're just entering into a regular contract, not reimbursed by.
Be careful. Here.
Very good. Great, and if no public comment on item E, vendor contract, can I have a motion to move forward with that?
I motion.
Thank you.
Board Member Edward Watson motions.
Yes, thank you. And a second, please. I'll second that one. I haven't gotten to the box score, so Doug Houston will second it, and I'll begin with the vote. My vote is yes.
Aye.
Boardman Watson, thank you.
Freeman, I.
Ethan, aye.
Thank you.
Miller, I.
Thank you, Miller. So unanimous and each voted aye. That brings us to F, approval of purchases. Various retailers, Amazon, Waxy, Costco, now total cumulatively over 5,000. Dr. Scott, are these budgeted items?
They are budgeted items. Waxy, who had heard of them before?
Oh, I have, of course. I worked for Ranger.
So, but they're huge. I mean, we have so many needs in the beginning
Yes,
that we're starting off from scratch. Then it'll taper off.
yes.
So these initial purchases, Waxy, by the way, for those participating, primarily janitorial supplies and bathroom supplies. Yeah. So,
Yes.
Very important.
A lot of the items that our parents are concerned about in the protocols, we're going to get back out to them, how we're cleaning. And
Yeah, and the
we
new
need all
cleaning
this
supplies that you've ordered. Oh, these are great. Any other?
Ethan
yeah, just-
motions to approve.
Yeah.
Are these cumulatively over 5,000? So
yeah.
each individual vendor is under 5,000?
No, some of these Waxy, I don't know the exact prices, but let's say right now it's cumulative over 5,000.
If anyone's over 5, they require, 2 competitive bids, and you've been doing that with the other products we've been acquiring, but any, to your knowledge, Mary Beth, that are over 5,000 individually?
Yes, Waxy is easily over 5,000.
Waxy is for the initial supplies. Were we able to do some competitive bidding on that or look at other vendors?
They did.
Okay.
Do you know the details?
Yes, I think Principal Trump would know too, but basically the initial order is about $8,000.
Okay. Yeah. So long as we're following what we've been doing, which is anytime something bubbles up to that significance, we're doing the competitive bids, going out, looking at who else supplies. That's good. We're complying. And of course, the bigger the bid, the more formal it should be, so.
Is it single purchase?
Waxy is a single purchase over 5,000.
But the competitive bid.
Yeah, it has to be a,
policy is a single
yeah,
purchase,
single
or is it an annual does it have to be?
if it
That's okay.
accumulates in an annual year over 5,000, same thing. So that's why something like, say website updates, which might be 1,000 a month or 950 a month, would eventually total more. So it has to be compared with others. Yeah. Yeah, great question. Any public comments on the acquisition of the necessary supplies from these retailers? And board comments? I'll ask for a motion then to approve.
Ethan motions.
Thank you, Ethan K.
Watson seconds.
Thank you. And then I'll begin as board member Houston. Yes. Watson.
Aye.
Yes.
Freeman, I. Miller, I.
Ethan,
Thank
aye.
you. Thank you. Unanimous. Appreciate that. Moving on to item G, authorized purchases of 3 computer carts. And the the amount looks like it's undetermined at the moment.
Each.
Dr. Scott, is this just total up when we do the 3 cards? These
Yeah,
are for holding and recharging computer devices, is that right?
Right.
Oh, the Chromebooks, yeah.
Computers. Stephen, are you available?
Hello, everyone. Yes, so as one of the public school, we will have our students from 3rd grade to 5th grade will have to take the state assessment. And they will have to use the Chromebook. They are not allowed to use iPad to take that state assessment. So we will have to prepare those device for our 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade students to take the state assessment starting from February.
Very good. On this acquisition, is it one where you can look and get 3 different bids for it?
Yes, we could, but I believe the amount will absolutely exceed $5,000. That's why we need the board approval first to allow us to find the best offer. And yeah, if we got a board approval, we can start searching. And then when we find the price, then we will get the board approval again.
Thank you. Okay, we'll open that up because we're going to take action on that. Any public comments on the acquisition of our computer carts, Chromebook recharging stations? Great. Could I have a motion then to charter Principal Chong to acquire these as needed for state testing?
I'll raise the motion.
Board Member Watson, thank you. A second. And Board Member Freeman. Great. And I'll begin the vote with a aye.
Aye.
Watson, aye.
Freeman, aye.
Ethan, I.
Thank you. And pass. And then online.
Miller, I.
Thank you, Miller. Great. Takes us to item H, rather, the final here. And there's a proposed stipend for Principal Chong for the after-school management. Is that correct? Broken out as delineated after-school supervision, rewriting the petition for K-8, extending it into middle school. And this will be annualized?
Yes, it will be.
Okay. And just then broken up into monthly payments with his regular salary?
Correct.
Okay. Board comments and questions. We'll give public a chance in a moment as well, but any board comments, questions for Dr. Scott? Again, I'll just state this, because the after-school program generates such high revenue, fits well within the budget. It's going to be more than a budget neutral endeavor. It's going to help us with retained earnings. So great. Public comments on the stipend for Principal Chung? Great. Then, oh, yes.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
So the after-school supervision is to assist, is it to assist director after school?
That's correct.
Okay.
And time that he will spend after school or before school on this outside of principal responsibilities. And he's already put in a lot of time.
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be.
My next question is regarding the regarding petition. Is that so we can, I could be prepared to
That's
request
right.
to extend?
We go to 6th grade right now.
Got it.
So we've got 2 years, but I'd like to get 1 year ahead, submit it, and be sure that everything is finished. This also will be outside principal responsibilities, and it's a lot of work. I mean, I wrote one myself. I don't want to do it. So Stephen's going to.
He seems passionate about it, so good. That's wonderful. Could I have a motion then for item H, approval of stipend for Principal Chung?
Motion to approve.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Freeman. And a second,
Second.
please. Oh, and Miller's
Second.
got the second. Thank you. And then I'll begin the vote. And I'll start with aye from Board Member Houston
Watson, aye.
Freeman, aye.
Ethan, I.
and Miller.
Aye.
Thank you. Passes. Great. Last section before final public comments. Any board recommendations, communications to our superintendent, executive director? He's got plenty on his plate right now that we are aware of, but
About
anything
the
else?
textbooks. We talked about that a while back. I think that was Stephen, actually, but the textbooks, any update on those?
The science textbooks is Twig, which is what Irvine uses.
Yeah.
We talked to a person today about being the science coordinator.
Yeah.
So we're hoping to move forward on that soon, but we're kind of confirming with some other candidates. The history, we have a 4th and 5th grade curriculum, but we're still looking to add on to that. So in the meantime, we're going to work with the standards, and the approach will be primary source documents. So when we go through that, we'll look to get books as we need them. Still not decided on that, but we've got so much to start with, we need to begin. As far as the Chinese books, did we get some textbooks in?
Yes, we did. Tomorrow, we're going to get the English textbooks, and the math textbooks will be early next week, and the science textbooks will be August 16th.
And this next week, one of us is going to go out, maybe Aaron, now that he's an employee, to the charge for shipping the Chinese textbooks are $8,000. So we're just going to drive up, pick them up, and bring them back.
Where is it?
LA?
Near San Jose.
Oh, okay, turnaround trip. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? Rent a van. Every dollar counts, right? We're frugal.
8,000.
Practical, but frugal.
Yeah.
So for those joining us, majority of textbooks arriving, those that have arrived already, others next week. The 15th will be where we receive some additional ones, but I like that. We're startup. You sometimes got to do things like that to save some dollars.
Stephen, you have a better grasp of the book situation. What would you like to add?
You're talking about Mandarin textbooks?
Any of
the textbooks, any comments or insights for the board members on textbooks?
I think we are getting the one we need right now, and we know for the first year, we have to be careful about the money. And I believe we can do more during the second year, but so far we are doing well. So we are good to go.
And to add on the money, because we got the grant, we're able to pay for these startup books out of the grant that we get reimbursed. So it's really a great situation financially for us.
Good. I'll restate that in case people didn't hear that. The $600,000 grant that we received, we're reimbursed for the purchases we make on textbooks with that money. And so that's great. What a great startup, and reserves all the rest of the money for programming. Great. Any other board recommendations? Final opportunity for any public comments. Give you an opportunity. Please type something in the chat if you want to do that. And Mary Beth will acknowledge that for me. If not, we're going to move for a motion for adjournment. Wonderful. Could I have a board member give us a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
And Mr. Freeman, motion to adjourn a second.
Ethan seconds.
And Ethan K for a second. And in this case, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? We're adjourned. We'll stop the recording. Thank you, parents and team members here.
Thank you.
Okay, a lot of fun.
They haven't gotten off the boat.